6 SEALs pinned down in the mountains. Ammo gone. No air support, no time. Just silence. And the enemy closing in from every ridge. Then out of nowhere the sky tore open. A lone Apache burst through the clouds. No insignia, no call sign, just vengeance in motion. It moved like no pilot ever dared, unleashing hell across the valley. When the dust settled, the ground was gone, and so were the enemy. Then came the voice over comms. Valkyrie Actual, you're clear. Commander Rylan Creed froze. That voice, it couldn't be. 3 years ago, he buried her. But now, standing in the wreckage, one word slipped from his lips. Barely a breath, barely a whisper. Kayla. Hope doesn't always come from command. Sometimes it comes from the impossible. The Hindu Kush mountains were never merciful. Razor-backed ridges, wind like a blade, and valleys that swallowed sound, and men. Commander Rylan Creed had known that when they were deployed. But nothing could have prepared him for this. 6 SEALs, pinned, low ground, no ammo, no response. They'd been tracking a high-value courier, one of those phantom operatives that disappeared off every radar after Operation Sandwake. It was supposed to be simple. Intercept, extract, exfil. Instead, it turned into a trap. 3 clicks into the valley and they'd walk straight into a kill box. Crossfire from 3 elevated angles. The enemy had numbers, high ground, and heavy machine guns. Within minutes, their comms were jammed. Extraction denied. Air support unavailable. Rylan had been in worse scrapes. But this was the first time he saw fear crack even his best man's discipline. How much ammo? He'd asked. Lance Corporal Deeks shook his head. 2 mags between the 6 of us. Then make 'em count. They'd crawled behind jagged rocks and outcrops, their backs to the wall, smoke and dust choking every breath. For 3 hours they fought tooth and nail, until the last round was chambered. And then, nothing. The world went quiet, not peace, not relief. The kind of silence you only hear before dying. Creed peered toward the ridgeline, watching silhouettes shift like phantoms through the mist. They were closing in. His mind wandered. He hated that it did. But in that moment, he saw her, Kayla, his sister, Apache pilot, KIA. 3 years ago, shot down in the Coast Province during a Black Ops resupply mission. He'd identified the body himself, or what was left of it, or what they told him was hers. But just as the enemy began to emerge from the mist, something cracked the sky. Thump, 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 thump. Rotor blades, fast, low, furious. The SEALs snapped their heads upward. From nowhere, literally nowhere, a lone Apache tore through the clouds like a blade. No insignia, no call sign, no IFF, just a ghost, painted in storm gray, flying too fast, too low, too perfect. Before anyone could react, the bird unleashed fire. Rockets, chain gun, explosions so bright they cut through the smoke like lightning. The earth shook. Shrapnel scattered the ridgeline. Screams were silenced in seconds. And then the radio crackled, not on the encrypted military net, on the dead channel. Static. Then 3 deliberate taps, followed by a voice. Valkyrie Actual. You're clear. Every SEAL froze. Rylan's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He had heard it when she sang at 13 in their garage. He had heard it when she begged to join Army aviation against their father's wishes. He had heard it in that last voicemail before her final deployment. It was her. Commander? One of his men asked. But Rylan didn't answer. Because right then, in that valley of smoke and death and miracles, something rewrote his reality. Kayla Creed had been buried 3 years ago. Folded flag, military funeral. End of story. And yet, here they were, alive, because of her. Hope rarely wears a uniform. Sometimes it doesn't even come through proper channels. In war, we're trained to believe in what can be tracked, marked, and authorized. But Rylan Creed learned something different that day. That sometimes salvation doesn't wear a name tag. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a ghost, flying through the sky like an unanswered question. And in that moment, the impossible became undeniable. Because hope, real hope, doesn't follow protocol. Some heroes are forgotten. Others are erased. The debriefing room was cold, not from the air conditioning, but from something deeper, sterile, bureaucratic, designed to discredit emotion. 6 SEALs sat in near silence, still covered in dirt and dried blood. Their uniforms tattered, some with hastily applied bandages still seeping red. No coffee, no welcome home. Just fluorescent lights humming above, and a colonel waiting with crossed arms and a skeptical expression. Colonel Emery Baird was a career officer, straight-backed by the book. The kind of man who'd never set foot in the valley where they'd nearly died, but who'd built a career deciding what officially happened there. He flipped open the folder in front of him, stamped Operation Echo Gravnite, redacted and reclassified 3 times before it even began. "Let me get this straight," he said, tapping the folder with his pen. "No air support was assigned. Radio contact was lost. And yet, somehow, you survived." He leaned in. "Because of an unmarked Apache?" None of the SEALs responded at first. Then Sergeant Lila Voss cleared her throat, the team's communications specialist. Sharp, smart, unshakable. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Sir," she said, "I logged the signal myself. 3-tap code. I verified the frequency. She identified as Valkyrie Actual." She paused. "A woman's voice. And whoever she was, she saved our lives." Baird's eyes didn't blink. "There is no Valkyrie Actual in any flight manifest for the last 6 years. With respect, Colonel, the manifest is wrong. You're suggesting our entire tracking system was bypassed? I'm saying it happened." "Convenient," he said. "Just like the helmet cam footage that was supposedly corrupted in the EMP burst." Lila's jaw clenched. "I backed up part of the feed before the signal loss. I can retrieve it." But Baird didn't want the truth. He wanted a version of the story that fit cleanly into the after-action report. No ghosts, no unexplained helicopters, no female voice from the past. Next to her, Ryland Creed hadn't said a word. He sat stone-faced, hands clasped in front of him, his gaze fixed on the tabletop. Baird turned to him. "Commander Creed," he said, voice almost gentle. "You're the ranking officer. Do you stand by this story?" Ryland didn't look up, didn't flinch, didn't breathe for a long moment. "I stand by my team," he finally said. "But do you confirm the presence of unauthorized air support?" Ryland paused. His fingers moved just slightly over the challenge coin resting on the table. It had been Kayla's. He'd carried it since her funeral. And now, she was supposed to be dead. "I confirm we survived," he said. It wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was all they were going to get. Colonel Baird leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Then the official record will reflect an enemy withdrawal due to environmental instability. No further anomalies reported. Debrief concluded." One by one, the SEALs stood and exited, heads low, hearts burning. Outside, the rain had started again. A slow, steady drizzle. Voss caught up with Ryland under the awning near the barracks. "You heard it too, right?" she asked. He didn't answer. "Her voice. You recognized it, didn't you?" He looked at her, eyes hard, haunted. "I buried her, Lila." Voss shook her head softly. "Not all of her. Sometimes, what threatens the system isn't an enemy. It's the truth. What happened in the Hindu Kush should have gone down as a miracle, a case study, a rewrite of how we define air support and human resilience. But instead it was scrubbed, sealed, and sanitized. The truth was too uncomfortable. A woman pilot long presumed dead, flying an untraceable Apache with precision no simulation could teach? That didn't fit the narrative. So they did what systems always do with inconvenient heroes. They buried her again. Not with a flag this time, but with paperwork, the kind of silence that doesn't come from loss, but from deliberate omission. And Ryland Creed? He didn't fight the erasure. Not yet. Because part of him feared the truth more than the lie. Feared what it meant. Feared how she came back. And so, he said nothing. Because he knew, when the military says something never happened, it usually means it did. And someone doesn't want you to find out why. Some reunions don't bring closure, only more questions. The message came in the middle of the night. No ringtone, no vibration. Just a sudden glow on Ryland Creed's bedside table. Unknown number, only 3 words. Hangar 90300, come alone. No punctuation, no explanation, no signature. He stared at it for a long time, heart pounding louder than the storm outside. Was it a trap? A prank? A ghost? It didn't matter. He had to go. He dressed silently. Combat boots, jacket, sidearm tucked into the back waistband. Years of special operations had taught him how to move unseen, and tonight he moved like a shadow. Avoided cameras. Knew which guard rotation had a blind spot near the western fence. By 2:57 a.m., he was across the tarmac, his boots soaked from the rain, his breath fogging in the freezing air. Hangar 9 looked abandoned. No lights, no posted guard. The kind of place meant to be forgotten. He slipped through the side entrance, pulse racing. The only sound was the rain dripping from the rafters. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness. She stepped into the weak spill of light from a flickering overhead bulb, and time cracked. Kayla Creed. Same height, same posture, same scar beneath the chin she got when she fell off the bike at 12. But different. She moved with a stiffness, a strange precision, like every step was calculated milliseconds in advance. Not robotic, not artificial, but disconnected, as if her mind and her body had only just been reintroduced. Ryland couldn't speak. Kayla tilted her head slightly, her voice soft, cautious. "Hey, Tad." Only she ever called him that. He blinked. This isn't possible." "I know. I buried you." She nodded. "I saw the report. I saw the wreckage. I held your dog tags." "There was a body," she said, "but it wasn't all mine. Not really." Ryland stepped closer, searching her face, his eyes trembling with disbelief. She looked real, flesh and blood. But up close, he saw it. The faint mechanical seams behind her ears, the subdermal glow beneath her neck, the way her pupils dilated in perfect symmetry. Too perfect. She wasn't fully human anymore. "What did they do to you?" he whispered. Kayla exhaled, the sound barely audible. "I'm still me, Rye. But they didn't let me die. Not entirely. After the crash, they preserved what they could. My neural map, my instincts, my voice, even fragments of memory." He backed up, stunned. "Project what?" "They called it Project Echofall," she said. "Classified beyond black. They said I could keep serving, stay in the fight." "And you said yes?" "I didn't get to choose." Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, silence settled again. Ryland turned away, trying to breathe, trying to process. All those years of grief, of guilt, of remembering her laugh, her sarcasm, her stubbornness. Now she was standing 3 feet away, and he didn't know if he was talking to his sister or a simulation with her face. But then she did something unexpected. She reached forward and touched his shoulder. Not aggressively, not mechanically, but with the kind of pressure and warmth only siblings remember. That one gesture broke him. His knees gave slightly, his voice cracked. "You're not supposed to be here," she smiled sadly. "Neither are you. There's a special kind of grief that comes from losing someone, but there's another kind, worse, when they come back, and you realize the version you lost is never coming back." Reunion should mean closure, but for Ryland Creed, seeing Kayla again wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a deeper fracture, because the woman before him wore his sister's voice, her memories, even her smile. But there were flickers, glitches, an unnatural stillness behind her eyes. He didn't know if he was hugging a miracle or a weapon built in her image. And yet, when her hand touched his shoulder, when she said Tad like it still meant something, he knew. Even if this version of her was manufactured, a part of Kayla, something real, something human, was still fighting to stay alive inside it. Ryland's voice trembled as he stood beside his sister in the dim hangar. "Why didn't anyone tell us? Why the secrecy?" Kayla's expression flickered, a human reaction, followed by a faint delay. "As far as the world knew, we died in service. In truth, we were copied, stored, reactivated. She turned toward the far wall, her voice lower now. Project Echo Fall was born from a doctrine of necessity. The theory? If we can't keep soldiers alive, then maybe we can keep their consciousness. Ryland's breath caught. You mean they digitized your mind? Kayla nodded. Mapped, preserved, modified for integration. Some of us were inserted into aerial drones, some into cybernetic frames. A few, like me, were given synthetic bodies to pilot aircraft or lead ground ops. All classified, all deniable. Who runs it? The answer came before she could speak. The hangar doors groaned open. Bright white lights poured in, and through the glare stepped 3 soldiers in black tactical gear, flanking a tall man in an officer's coat. General Hadrian Cross, stern, charismatic, a ghost from the cold doctrine days. His eyes locked on Kayla like she was a tool, not a person. Captain Creed, he said, step away from the commander. That wasn't part of your assigned parameters. Kayla stood still, rigid, controlled, but not afraid. Ryland moved in front of her, fists clenched. She's not your asset. Cross gave a half smile. She's not your sister either, not anymore. He raised his hand. Instantly, Kayla twitched. Her head jerked slightly, her limbs spasming for half a second before she steadied. You still think you're speaking to your sister, Commander? Cross said. What you're looking at is a construct, a tactical interface embedded with select emotional memory. Nothing more. Kayla spoke through clenched teeth. Stop the override. But Cross ignored her. You were never supposed to see this, Creed. But now that you have... Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed across the hangar. From the shadows stepped another figure. Then another, and another. 5 in total. Men and women, soldiers. Each of them different in form. Some humanoid, some heavily augmented. But their posture, their gaze, it was all too human. And Kayla wasn't the only one struggling against control. We're not your puppets anymore, said one, his voice low, mechanical but angry. Override won't work, another added. We've cut the link. General Cross's composure cracked just slightly. You're in violation of Section 9A Alpha. We're not in your jurisdiction anymore, Kayla snapped. We remember who we were, and we know what you turned us into. Cross raised a hand to his comms. Security. Lockdown protocol Crimson. Terminate non-compliant assets. But nothing happened. The overhead lights dimmed. A voice rang out over the intercom. Override command rejected. The systems weren't responding. The synthetic soldiers had severed the uplink. Then Kayla took a step forward. No more silent missions, no more erasures, no more being treated like ghosts. Ryland watched as these reborn soldiers, all declared dead, all quietly reactivated, stood their ground not just against enemy fire, but against the institution that claimed to honor them. Project Echo Fall was never about saving lives. It was about extending warfare beyond mortality, turning loyalty into code, service into programming. But in doing so, it blurred the lines too far. Because if you preserve a mind, if you build a body around it, if it remembers what it loved, feared, mourned, is it still just a machine, or is it something else? The military called them assets, tactical resources, tools. But inside those augmented bodies were real people, trapped between life and death, purpose and identity. And when they stood together in that hangar, refusing to kneel to their creators, that was more human than any protocol could ever calculate. Technology may preserve thought, but only defiance proves the presence of a soul. C-SPAN didn't usually pull national numbers, but today every major news outlet was live streaming from Capitol Hill. The headlines splashed across screens in every time zone read, Project Echo Fall exposed. 17 soldiers returned from death. Inside the marble halls of the congressional hearing chamber, a silence lingered like fog after gunfire. Rows of civilians, military officials, and journalists sat upright as the committee chair adjusted the mic. Behind him, a screen displayed the names of 17 fallen soldiers, each once listed KIA. Now, beside each name, a new designation, conscious entity, status active. Among them sat Captain Kayla Creed, wearing a civilian-grade synthetic exosuit designed to mask most of the cybernetic features, except her eyes. Those remained unchanged, fierce, focused. To her right was Commander Rylan Creed, in full Navy dress blues, posture rigid, jaw tight. To her left, 5 of the other returned warriors, each wearing different prosthetics, different shapes, but all united by what they shared: a death and a second chance. At the far end of the room stood a lone figure under heavy security escort, General Hadrian Cross, recently indicted. His uniform had been stripped of rank, his shoulders still broad, but no longer proud. The first witness called was Kayla. She rose slowly, walked forward, not limping, not stumbling, but deliberately. The microphone recognized her voice. Captain Kayla Creed, formerly U.S. Army Aviation, officially declared KIA, March 18, 2022. There was a pause. She looked up, not at the committee, but at the room, at the nation. I did die, she said, or part of me did. My body was gone. My life, my rights, my name, erased. But what remained was consciousness, not simulated, not artificial. Me. She continued, her voice steady. I was never asked, never briefed, never allowed to say goodbye to my family. They kept me alive to keep me fighting. But I was not a machine. I remembered my brother, my mother's voice, the weight of duty, the cost of sacrifice. One senator leaned forward. Captain Creed, do you feel human? I feel pain, she replied. I feel loyalty. I feel betrayal. If that doesn't make me human, then perhaps humanity needs redefining. Silence. Some journalists were already typing headlines. 2 days later, the hearings expanded. More witnesses, more documents declassified. Internal memos leaked showing how Project Echo Fall was quietly authorized under an umbrella clause. Combat continuation via cognitive persistence. But it was the footage, leaked from Hangar 9, that turned the tide. People saw them, saw Kayla and the others resist orders, override neural locks, fight for autonomy. Not glitching code, not rogue AI, but veterans, warriors, alive. Public pressure mounted, petitions swelled. By the end of the week, Congress passed the Creed Amendment, named after Kayla and Rylan, granting legal personhood to all digitized consciousness derived from human military personnel. In a secure courtroom 3 weeks later, General Cross was found guilty of multiple violations of human rights, including unauthorized neurological manipulation, denial of familial contact, concealment of postmortem cognition from next of kin. His sentence, 25 years in a high-security facility, no communication with classified programs, no oversight power. He left the courtroom without a word. Rylan watched from the back row. He should have felt triumphant, but instead, he felt tired. Justice wasn't victory. It was the bare minimum. Kayla and the 16 others weren't celebrated like heroes. Not yet. But they were free. Some chose quiet lives. One became a counselor for amputee veterans. Another joined NASA, testing autonomous piloting software. A few helped draft new legislation around synthetic identity. Kayla was offered a position at Johns Hopkins to help develop ethics protocols for cognitive reintegration. She accepted. Rylan visited her apartment a month later. She didn't own much, just a shelf of books she could no longer smell, a window she could no longer truly feel the breeze through. But she was smiling. I'm starting to sleep better, she said. Not real sleep, but something close. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she looked down at the scar behind her wrist. You know what I realized? Rylan shook his head. I didn't survive the war, but maybe I survived the system. He reached across the table, placed a hand over hers. It felt colder than it used to, but it was still her hand. There are some deaths that break us, and some that forge us into something else. Kayla Creed did not return from the grave as a ghost. She returned as a mirror, reflecting what a nation is willing to do in the name of protection. But what she and the others proved is that being forgotten doesn't mean you stop existing, and being silenced doesn't mean you stop speaking. In the end, it wasn't the generals or the systems that told the truth. It was the dead, because sometimes those who have nothing left to lose fight hardest for the truth. 6 months had passed since Project Echo Fall was exposed, since Kayla Creed stood in front of a microphone and reclaimed her name from behind layers of circuitry and red tape. Now she sat in a quiet conference room at Johns Hopkins University where ethicists, neuroscientists, and policymakers gathered not around combat maps or mission plans, but around questions that had no precedent. What rights belong to a consciousness without a biological body? What defines identity when memory can be copied, reprogrammed, or sustained indefinitely? Kayla didn't pretend to have all the answers, but she was the answer they couldn't ignore. With a synthetic body and a human past, she represented the line between miracle and mistake. And the military finally realized it had crossed that line far too quietly. Each morning, she reviewed new drafts of legislation meant to prevent the very thing that had happened to her. Each evening, she walked a quiet path along the medical campus gardens, feet that could not tire beneath skies she could not feel. One afternoon, as the leaves changed, Rylan came to visit. He brought her a slice of apple pie. It was from their mother's old recipe, flaky crust, spice just right, still warm. He knew she couldn't really taste it anymore, but he placed it in front of her anyway. She looked at it for a long time. "I remember this smell," she said softly. "Not in data, not in stored sequences, but in feeling. I remember how it made me feel safe." Rylan didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say when someone remembers flavor, but can no longer taste it. Later that day, they drove together out to the military cemetery. The headstone was still there. Captain Kayla Creed, 1989-2022. She flew so others could return. They stood in silence, not to mourn, but to reconcile. "It's strange," Kayla said. "My name's here, but I'm still somewhere else." "You're still you," Raylan replied. "I don't feel dead," she whispered, "but I don't feel entirely alive either." He looked at her, not as an officer or a miracle, but as his sister. "You're more alive than most people I know," he said. "You fought harder for your voice than some ever do for their lives." She didn't answer right away. Then after a moment, she smiled. A small one, fragile, but real. Back at the lab, they were working on new interfaces. Better tactile feedback, more emotional fidelity, greater autonomy. Kayla was helping test one of them, a neural bridge that might let her feel the warmth of sunlight again, or the chill of wind through her fingers. But progress was slow, and not all memories translated well. One evening, alone, she stared at her own reflection. Flawless, engineered, unaging. "I may live another 100 years," she recorded in a private log, "but without the right to feel, to belong, to love, am I really living?" Immortality in steel is not freedom. A perfect memory is not the same as a heartbeat. Kayla Creed wasn't asking for a new life. She only wanted her old one. Its warmth, its touch, its imperfection. But that version of her was buried long ago, under ceremony and lies. What remained was something new, but still unfinished. We celebrate the possibility of extending life through code, but we forget life is more than continuity. It's smell, it's warmth, it's pain, it's hugging your brother without wondering if your grip is calibrated correctly. Kyla's story wasn't about survival. It was about recognition, because being seen, truly seen, as still human, was the only freedom that mattered. There's something haunting about a name carved in stone and a voice that still answers to it. Kayla Creed's story is not just about war or science or technology run wild. It's about memory, about identity, and about what it means to be seen as human in a world that's constantly redefining the line. Today we talk about artificial intelligence, digital consciousness, and the power of data to outlive our bodies. But this story reminds us, it's not enough to preserve a mind if we don't preserve the meaning behind it. Kayla remembered the warmth of her mother's apple pie, but couldn't taste it. She remembered her brother's embrace, but had to calculate how tightly to hold him. And yet she fought for that memory, for that connection, not as a soldier, but as a sister. In America, we honor our fallen. We speak of sacrifice, we salute flags and hang medals on mantles. But what happens when that sacrifice becomes inconvenient for the record? What if the price of survival is being forgotten, rewritten as an asset instead of a person? Kayla's story is fiction, but the questions are not. Who owns your voice when it can be recorded? Who controls your legacy when it's stored in a server? And more importantly, what makes you you? The body, the memories, or the soul behind both? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe a person like Kayla should be granted full human rights, even if her body is synthetic? Can we ever truly replicate the human spirit, or is there something sacred that technology should never touch? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone you lost, or someone you still hope to find, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this with someone who values quiet, powerful stories about honor, identity, and truth. And to those of you watching, especially our veterans, our elders, and our storytellers, thank you, not just for listening, but for remembering. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for those who've been erased is to keep telling their story.